We are at Husker Harvest Days talking Nebraska bankers. Mike Pate, who is with United Republic Bank in Omaha, is the chairman-elect of the NBA. And Mike, let's talk about Nebraska bankers and the role they play in making sure this old Nebraska economy keeps rolling.
Well, you know, banking is a critical part of our economic development. The bankers are the ones who provide access to capital. They contribute to the growth in the economy, and without banks, where would we be? It's a very, very vital part of our economic vitality in the state.
You come to events like Husker Harvest Days, and not only are you hitting agriculture, farmers, ranchers, but also a lot of rural citizens and folks that just have an interest. So what are some of the messages you're telling folks here?
You know, and the messages we're telling people here is that Nebraska banks are healthy banks. They make sensible decisions. They give sound advice, which is very critical when you're in any business operation. Farming is a big business operation as well. And when you're relying on financial advice, you need to go talk to your banker.
One of the things that the bankers do that maybe a lot of folks don't realize is the partnership that you work with the University of Nebraska and others in providing scholarships to folks that may want to become bankers, because like every other industry, looking for that next generation, and really can provide some great opportunity, really a win-win only for that student but also for that local bank.
Absolutely, and we're very, very involved with the university and through our foundation and through our educational programs as well, and our internship programs as well. There are several agriculture internships that we've introduced and offered throughout the state this year, and very proud to be part of that.
Well, Mike, I would guess I've got to ask the question when we talk to bankers. Interest rates, as we all know, we're looking for that other shoe to drop. I'm sure you've had those conversations, and not only internally but within the association and even outside of the state of Nebraska. I don't want to get too political or too much into the economic weeds, but let's talk about that. That's going to happen, and then are banks ready for that when that happens to provide the credit that folks are going to need?
Yeah, we've been in an extended period of low interest rates for way too long, and obviously the only way interest rates can go is up. The question is when will that happen? And none of us are economists or predictors of interest rates, but I would tell you that the economy seems to be driving some economic growth. But the question is it enough growth to drive interest rates up at this point in time? There are a lot of signs that says that it is, but there are also some signs that says it isn't. You take a look at the unemployment rate, for example, which is now about 6.2%. But along with that unemployment rate dropping, so has the number of underemployed or people that have just dropped off the unemployment rolls, if you will. So the number is probably a little bit higher than that. So, you know, that's a big driver of economic growth too. And so if you're growing at 2.5% a year, and there's only about 2.5% of growth in jobs, you're really not net growing jobs either. And the private sector is going to have to drive for that, and then that will grow the economy. And once the economy starts growing, interest rates will start going up.
Talk to us a little bit about the Dodd-Frank situation. As it continues to kind of unfold, it's kind of had an undue impact on some of the smaller banks and those community banks, those rural banks, and really even banks in Omaha, I would assume that probably was unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences, but all banks are having to still comply with the regulations that were created under Dodd-Frank, which is 4,500 pages of regulatory legislation. So it has impacted the banks, and it's also impacted the consumers to a degree, where the banks have to pass on that cost because that's a cost to do that. And the problem is community banks, like most banks in Nebraska and most banks in Omaha as well, were not contributors to any of the problems that created this legislation that we got now under Dodd-Frank. And we're trying as an industry to make sure that we communicate and convey to our regulators that banks aren't all the same. Nebraska banks are sensible, community banks are sensible, all banks are commercial banks, and the commercial banks did not create the problems. But we got Dodd-Frank, and so we're all having to pay the price as a result of that, unfortunately.
Sure. Well, Mike, appreciate your time, and great to get an update on Nebraska bankers.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Mike Pate from United Republic Bank in Omaha, the chairman-elect of the Nebraska Bankers Association. On the road at Husker Harvest Days near Grand Island for Ag View, I'm Ken Rahjes.